Okay, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really cool review slash comparison for you from a really famous and popular brand that you do not really see too much on my channel. The brand is, of course, Casio. They were founded back in 1974. Actually, before that was the main brand, but essentially their first watch was made in 1974, which is a Casiotron, which these two watches actually still have the same kind of basic silhouette of that original Casiotron. Of course, the brand is Japanese in origin. And basically they're known for their wide range of digital watch offerings, from lines like G-Shock, Edifice, all the way up to Oceanus. So they do have some and more. I mean, stuff that just, it goes on for days. Casio is, they're pretty much the digital watch kings. And of course, this is a digital watch. Essentially, the key common characteristics and design language you're looking for digital watch is, you know, it's just non-analog. It has a digital readout of the timing information. Now, we're going to mainly focus on these two models here, which is basically there's this Casio Europe Vintage A1000D-7EF, which is part of their premium line. And then there's also the regular Casio Vintage A168WA-1, which is pretty much the very easily accessible and quite popular model. So we're going to kind of compare the premium versus the popper here, the $20 watch versus the $120 watch. And I think it's a pretty interesting comparison. And these are actually both my son's watches. And I figured I would share them with you guys because I did a couple posts and there was a couple people that are interested in it. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys. So let's go ahead and get these pieces in hand. Okay, so here's the piece that pretty much everybody's is excited about. This all stainless steel model from Casio Europe. It's really pretty. Obviously, it has that nice mother of pearl, that mop dial. It's actually a little bit larger as well. It's a little bit wider, a little bit longer than your typical Casio, and it's also quite thin in comparison. And then it actually has a bit more of a robust bracelet. I mean, it's still quite thin, guys. Let's face it. This is not. This is a $120 watch. This isn't a $1,000 watch. All right. Let's not get it mistaken here. The stainless steel. It does have mineral glass. But versus a resin case with a chrome plate and then resin glass. So again, although this is kind of a higher spec option, it is not by any means some world-class luxury watch. But you know, there are some surprisingly nice finishing work that's done here. As you can see, look at the transitions from the brushed and polished. Beautiful, actually. And they even tie it in to the sides as well. We'll go ahead and let that focus. As you can see, really nice. So there are some impressive little tricks that they did on this case that are really quite nice. But essentially at their heart, you know, it's the same information on here. They both light up. One does a white light up versus the, as you can see there, versus the more blue here. So these pieces essentially are my son's. He is quite young. He's actually 8 years old. He has another one. This is actually one that I repurchased because they're so cheap, you know, at just about 18 bucks. I purchased it so I could use it for the video for comparison. It's nice and clean and unbeat up, but he has one that he's been wearing for probably 2 years now that is just beat to death, sleeps in it. It has some really gross grime back here and everything. And I did want to upgrade him to something a little bit more special. And I thought this steel piece would be a nice one that he could wear you know, when we go out and whatnot, kind of get our wristwatch checks for the Instagram family and whatnot. So yeah, this was just kind of a cool piece. I was very lucky to be able to find it because it is something that is not easily sourced. It's not like you can just go on Amazon and find one of these bad boys. I actually had to go on eBay and purchase this from a European seller who gave me not too shabby of a price, not too far, you know, after shipping and everything above retail, which wasn't bad at all. But this bad boy, of course, I could get on Amazon for about 18 bucks, and it's quite good. And there's a reason why these are so iconic. But as far as the new kid in town, let's go ahead and quickly take a look at the box it comes in, which is pretty nice, I gotta say, compared to the kind of little piece of plastic that the other well, it's a little bit of cardboard, a little bit of plastic for the very basic Casio. But this is actually like super plush, essentially. And then it just has the little booklet. We got the extra links here that I pulled out. And the link system, you know, this isn't going to be super solid or anything. It's still hollow. It has your very basic kind of Casio. They're what they're famous for is just the little L triggers. You push out, pull out, and then you just kind of wiggle and work and pop them off. Then you pop them back on. The nice thing that they did is they actually do have the quick release spring bars in there, which is good. So I can actually change this out really quick. Not that there are many straps that I would put onto here, just because it is, you know, the way that it's set up with the stepped lugs there, where it's going to be that 18 millimeter lug distance, but then it steps out to about 21, very similar to what you have here on kind of your run-of-the-mill Casio. But you can see the way they sit there. Of course, this is just fully the chrome plate on it, a little bit thicker, so you just get a little bit more of a svelte look, a little bit more premium. Again, nothing crazy, guys. I was actually pleasantly surprised by that little suede pouch in there, though. That was pretty nice. So there's not too much to say here, guys. 38 millimeters wide, 7.3 millimeters thick. So very thin here, and then this 39.6 millimeters lug to lug. So it is slightly bigger than the A16 8WA-1. Wish I knew the nickname of this bad boy, but it is. So let's just call it the resin case. So this one is going to be the 36.3 millimeters wide with a 9.6 millimeter height and a 38.6 millimeters lug to lug. So very similar footprint here. This is going to be a little bit wider, of course, and thinner, which is actually going to make it wear a little bit larger as far as visually. And you know what, it kind of reminds me of, as far as kind of you know, when a brand does a little bit of a halo model of something that's quite familiar, and is what I have for my Seiko here. Let me pull it out. I got it off camera here in a little case. Just grab that. But in the meantime, just take a look at that glorious mop dial. But it reminds me a little bit of this guy right here, my SJE. Also quite thin, except of course this is automatic, sporting their 6L35. This thing is a crazy bargain, guys, because all the other 6L powered watches that are coming out right now are like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. So if you can pick one of these up around there, 2,200 retail, this is actually quite a deal, and you can probably get them a little bit lower. I was very, very fortunate to be able to get it under its retail price. But when you think about the cost of other watches with these movements, and they don't even have the bracelet on there, it's pretty insane. So this thing is like the deal of the century. But it did remind me a lot of this Seiko, because of it has that, you know, real nice dial there that gives you something to look at. Really gorgeous. Of course, it's not a snowflake dial by any means, which are really well known, kind of within the circles of Seiko. But it does have, I guess, a similar idea, right? Just adding some texture to this really great dial. Oh, it looks like there's a little bit of a smudge on there. Let me just quickly get a little breath test and wipe this thing off. That might be an actual scratch on there, because this is, again, this is mineral, so I'll have to maybe give it a tougher scrub there, off camera. But yeah, again, this is, at the end of the day, if you were to buy any other watch that was easier to get, that was $100, you would also expect a mineral crystal that can be scratched. You would be probably fine with how tinny and everything this is. But the crazy thing is in comparison, it's actually feels so much more solid. So with that said, let's go ahead and actually get these pieces on wrist. Okay, as you can see, this A1000 model is actually filling up my wrist pretty nicely. You know, it is a smaller watch, a little bit more petite, but because it's flat and whatnot, I mean, this is really kind of the opposite end of a metal G-Shock, right? Those things are much bigger, much bulkier, rougher around the edges, but still a lot of fun, especially in metal. This is kind of the sleek European spec there, and I think it's pretty good looking. You know, obviously minus 4 more links for when it's fitted for my son, but you know, it fits his wrist well, and I'm actually surprised by how well it fits my wrist. And then comparison to the classic here, of course, this one's gonna look a little bit smaller because it is, and because it's a little bit taller, it makes it feel also a little bit more, I guess, the spacing on it and whatnot feels a bit larger, taller, which makes it feel a little bit more compact and small. But I do really like this bracelet. Really easily to adjust there. You actually adjust it a lot like a mesh, essentially, where you just move this little guy up and down. Essentially, you pop this up, scoot it up and down, and then you're good to go. So I actually don't mind this bracelet at all. I think it's pretty cool. Obviously, it feels super light and tinny compared to anything else I've ever owned. But it's also super comfortable, and you can really just forget about it on the wrist. It really just melts away versus here. It's obviously still very lightweight on the wrist, and it's very thin and low profile, but it does give you slightly more presence, I guess. I mean, nothing like a mechanical watch by any means, but it doesn't feel like it's gonna fly off your wrist like this. This is just like, this is, I don't know, it's almost to a level of comedy how this watch makes you feel on your wrist when you're used to you know, more substantial pieces. And I'm not saying just divers, I mean even the SJE here, although it's you know, quite thin and whatnot, the feeling is of course much different on wrist in comparison. So actually, let me do that real quick. So we'll take another last look at this guy here. While it's still clean and pristine, it's kind of my, I guess it'll be my son's backup watch now. So he can get rotating, but we'll put this on and we'll just kind of get a look on my 7¼ inch wrist, kind of comparatively how these look. And you know what, as far as just like at an initial glance, it's a cool looking white dialed watch with some texture on it. And it does have some really interesting fine transitions on the case. Here you do also get some nice fine transitions. You get the Zaratsu polish and whatnot. Very thin. You can see rides very similar how thin these ride on the wrist. Of course, this is going to feel much more substantial because it is a mechanical timepiece and whatnot. But that little bit of magic you get from the depth in the dial, I feel like you also get that same little bit of magic here. So yeah, this thing it's a little guy. I mean, some of you are probably looking at this thinking, God, that looks tiny on his wrist. Even up close with plenty of lens distortion, that watch does not look large at all. Then you get it down here and it starts just looking smaller and smaller. But you know what? When you look at that taper and everything, it is it's balanced really, really well. I have to say the proportions are really dialed in, and I'm pretty impressed, guys. I'm kind of glad that we had some viewers that actually kind of pressured me to do a full-on review of this piece, because I really wasn't planning to. It was really just going to go straight into my son's collection and maybe into a couple Instagram shots. But I'm glad that we're taking a look at this with a little bit of a more critical eye, because it is a pretty cool and interesting piece. Let's do low light transition. It won't really be a loom shot because this stuff does light up, but just so you guys can kind of see some of the light play off of the dial and whatnot and the finishing. So let's go ahead and set that up. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights. Got my low light ready, but actually let's do a quick little comparison for the illuminator status on these bad boys. So you see the very clear white light up versus the very classic, oh, if it will focus, stinking light. Here, let's do this. Let's get this to focus back. Okay. And press the button now. Blue. Okay, so we got the blue. And we got the white. Okay, so now that you've seen that, let's actually just focus on the new kid in town here. We'll even slide it a little bit more in so you can get more looks at that case. Look at the brushing there on that top of the bezel. Beautiful flat brush pull. Looks really, really good. And then you do have also that nice dial, which does offer quite a bit of different hues and whatnot as it hits. Really nice. Then you get a little bit of a, here we go. You can see, obviously, you can get an idea. You can see the little micro scratches and whatnot in the harsher light. You can see a little bit of cloudiness from just from a little bit of oil and moisture and whatnot on the steel. But I am pretty impressed with the sharp transitions on that case. This case is really nice. I think there is definitely a market for it. I'm hoping that with the success that these have seen, that they release something similar, maybe one more step up, kind of in between metal G-Shock and this, maybe slightly larger, maybe get a 40 millimeter, but just something a little bit more refined than your typical G-Shock, but a little bit beefier than these classic vintage style Casios. So really nice to look at there, guys. You know, again, nothing luxurious or anything crazy like that when it comes to this piece, but it is a fun piece. You know, these bracelets are very similar. They're gonna kind of have that 18 millimeter lug width, and then they step out about 21. You know, you got the hollow links and end links and whatnot. The bracelets are, the clasps are different. You do get the push button deployment, folding clasp there on this A1000 versus the classic resin. That's going to have that little adjustable guy, which I really don't mind. You know, as far as on wrist, it's a very similar wear between these two. As far as model variants go, there are actually quite a few different configurations on both sides. You'll see a couple of different iterations and slight variations on the resin case. And as far as this premium line, there are a couple of different variations as well. There's another steel, you know, that silver finish, but it has like a kind of black pearl insert, and then there's also like 3 different shades of like rose gold. So those are also available, and then there's also a mesh bracelet option versus this with the brushed and polished kind of 3-link style. As far as comparable models, it's really tough. You can't really compare too much of this. I think it's again, it's such a unique, fun little space. It's kind of you know, the hot version of the cheap watch. It's kind of souped up and swept up, and it's something that's really special. And I think it is quite special. Although at the end of the day, it's still a digital watch with with a hollow bracelet. You know, you never knew you'd be so excited about a stainless steel case, even though like every other case, pretty much except for, I think I have one resin Digi tuna or a digital tune Digi tuna that has a resin case. But I mean, even most of my G-Shocks actually have steel cases. So it's one of those things, you don't really know how much you'd be into it until you finally get it, and it's actually kind of exciting. You know, the bottom line, this is a lot of fun for the money, but hey, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. You know, obviously I don't think I'd pay too much more than I did pay for this. I want to say it was about like 140 after shipping. And you know, I think it's worth it. It's not a super expensive piece. If my son destroys it, it will kind of suck. But at the same time, if he wears it and wears it in the way he wore it in his last Casio, and kind of made it gross and has a story, and keeps fostering his love for wristwatches, then it's totally worth the $140 spent. So again, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do it like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.